Good morning or good afternoon to those who have joined us. Some of us are connecting to this webinar from Ontario in Canada, and some are connecting from Johannesburg and Cape Town in South Africa, and perhaps from other places. So good day, should I say. There are a couple of people still logging in, but we've got quite a bit of material to cover with you, so we don't want to hang around too long waiting for people to join. My background is project management, so in my world we start on time. So welcome to all, a special welcome to our panelists who I'll introduce to you in a moment. I think these are tough times we're going through, and we're all learning to do things a little different. So that's really what we want to talk about a little bit this morning, and hopefully there's something that you can take away with you and something that you can implement, and maybe something that intrigues you that you'd like to maybe connect with one of us and talk a bit more about. And I think that's what this is all about. And I think collaboration in the new normal is going to become even more important than it has been until now. Just a note that as you join, you will be in mute mode. So we do hope to have one or two conversations. If there are questions coming up, I've asked Columba to watch the TikTok for me to see as questions come up. We will ask you about some of your challenges that you're facing, so you might want to have a pen handy, a pen and paper. We are in Zoom meetings, so you might want to set your view to speaker view, so when one of the panelists is talking, you can actually see who's talking. So that might help a little bit. We do hope that you have some questions, so do post them to the chat box. And, you know, maybe as we address your question, and we hope to address all of them, we might be able to have, as I say, have a brief conversation. So let us get started. Let us get going. I'm going to do a few introductions, and then we'll get straight into the discussions the panelists will be leading. As an introduction, my name, for those who don't know, is Ray Corvallis. I've had a pretty good career in the mining industry, and I've been in the mining industry for the best part of 35 years. And I founded a group called the Essential Group. And at the Essential Group, what we do is we help leaders of organizations to create concise and clear strategies. We help leaders of organizations develop the underlying objectives and goals for that organization. And most importantly, we help to equip the leaders to deliver upon that, because that's where strategy normally fails, is in the delivery. And to cascade that strategy into the organization and to deliver upon that for the stakeholders of the business. We're also joined by Ben Spies. Ben is a long-time colleague and friend and mentor of mine, and I look up to Ben in many, many respects and admire the work that he's done. And Ben is the chairman of and founder of a company called the Competence Lab, based in Cape Town in South Africa. And Ben's group is a group of industrial psychologists that specialize in leadership competency assessments, leadership development, behavior modification, as well as coaching and aligning business values with people values and organizational values. So Ben, thank you for joining us. John Doyle, our other panelist who's joining us. John, also a good friend of mine, experienced business executive and community leader, and I must add, much loved community leader in the city of Burlington, in the Greater Toronto area. And Ben, John has a demonstrated and admirable history of strategy development, working with leaders of organizations, as well as leadership development within the industrial, or rather information technology sector, as well as in the mining sector. We're also joined by Columba Varney. Columba Varney I've also worked with for a number of years. Columba is an HR professional and founder of the HR Con Group. And Columba has vast experience both in operational as well as in strategic human resource or human capital management. We also joined, lastly, but by no means leastly, by Tracy Swanepoel. Tracy is also someone I've worked with quite extensively. She's the founder and CEO of a group called Thinkspiration, which is quite a specialist consultancy group that's dedicated to getting your strategy not only understood, but owned by the people of your organization, by the people that drive the business. Personally, I've worked with Tracy, and the work she does is absolutely phenomenal. She's also the author of a book called The Leadership Riptide and How to Escape. And that book was selected by the South African Board of People Practices as one of the top 5 leadership books in 2017. So congratulations, Tracy, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. So let's get moving. I was chatting as we started, before some of you joined. I'm up at a mine site in Northern Ontario, arrived here on Saturday evening, and late Saturday night I get a message I need to go for a COVID test first thing Sunday morning, where we scheduled to begin some leadership development with some of the leaders on a Sunday morning. These are mines, so mines run 7 days a week. Unfortunately, that test was negative, done at 6 a.m. in the morning. But I think it struck me that things have changed. Our world has changed. Clearly, COVID is having a massive influence on not just our lives, but how business is done. I got to talk to some of the participants, some of the leaders on the program, and it's so clear talking to them how they, even at the front line of a mine, are doing things differently. Their morning meetings are different. Every engagement they have where people need to engage is questioned. Do I need to be there? Heck, wouldn't that be good that we only went to meetings we needed to be in, right? So there's some good things coming out of this, but certainly every engagement from the mine, it's so evident that it's changing. It's different from what it used to be. And I do remember attending the PDAC in March and attending a few functions in the evenings like we do at these conventions. And strangely, there was 2 people who were quite reluctant to shake my hand. COVID wasn't even a real thing for us in Canada back then. But there were people reluctant to shake my hand, and I thought that was a little strange. You know, that was a done thing. Today, not so strange. Can't remember when last I shook someone's hand when I met them. Okay, so the world is changing. I mean, even at the time that we were preparing the conversations for this webinar, there had been around 30 million COVID cases that were recorded, and probably around 1 million deaths at the time, sadly. However, in just a few short weeks, that number is now in excess of 55 million cases and approaching 1.5 million deaths worldwide. So this crisis is a disruption to our lives. It's a disaster to some of our lives. And it certainly is beginning to resurge. And the resurge is appearing to be even more significant than the initial wave. There is talk of a vaccine, and I think we all pray that that can be distributed as soon as possible and can bring an end to this. But the question I have is, will business ever be the same? Will our normal ever be the same? Or do we need to prepare for a new normal? My gut instinct, looking at what's happening and how meetings and how engagements are changing, is I don't think we'll ever get back to what it was. And for good reason, maybe. I think leaders need to step out of that mindset of business as usual, business as normal, into a new mindset of how can I take maximum advantage of what this disaster, what this disruption has brought to my business and to my life. How can I take maximum advantage of the trends and the opportunities that are presented to me to be more efficient? Also, how can I prepare myself for the threats and the challenges that the same disruption brings? Strategy, leadership, and culture are inextricably linked. However, it's the leader that has a profound influence on the culture of the organization, on the people of the organization. And it's the leader who has a profound influence on the strategy and where that business goes. So as we start talking and hand over to our first panelist, Ben, I want to just pause for a moment and ask you to maybe write down, what are your top 3 challenges that you face, in particular through the disruption of this pandemic? Write them down, and if you have a moment, maybe post your top challenge into the chat box. And maybe if we get an opportunity, we can maybe talk to the top 1 or 2 that people have posted. So I do encourage you to do that. So moving on, Ben, talk to us a little bit about the impact that this disruption is having on the emotional aspects of leadership. And how can leaders and people within the business be better equipped to increase the positive emotional pulse of the organization and of the people of the business.
Ray, thank you very much. If I look at the first slide that I want to present, I think the key thing is that the current reality of COVID-19 and the issue, the impact that it's had on the economy, that it's had on businesses in terms of retrenchments, restructuring, and then with that, I think people in social media and specifically in the press area has actually utilized this to their own advantage to sell themselves. But this has created havoc because at the end of the day, this reality is impacting firstly on the emotions and minds of people. And for the first time, I'm finding that leaders are understanding that the emotional and mental state of the employees has a major impact on how those employees are going to behave in the job situation. I think COVID has created an opportunity for leaders to become more sensitive to their own emotions and to the emotions of their people, because we are finding increased levels of insecurity, fear, stress, depression, substance abuse. I mean, if I talk to my colleagues in the medical field, and that has an impact at the end of the day on how individuals and teams are going to think, how they're going to act. That's going to determine the extent to which they'll possibly talk to each other or not. Ray, you referred to somebody, we haven't greeted people for a long period of time, and that's going to have an impact on the ability of our people and our leaders to focus. Because stress, insecurity, isolation, all of those aspects has a major mental impact. And I mean, I'm not going to go through all the details here on my slide, but that is what we have found through our mental and emotional wellness surveys. With the pulse rate of individuals, employees, depression, substance abuse, stress, denial, withdrawal, a lot of individuals, because they fear they're going to lose their jobs, and a lot of their colleagues have been retrenched, has had those symptoms, which has a major impact on their ability to commit, to perform, to energize themselves. On the hard perceptions of leaders, emotional self-management is a major problem to a lot of leaders in senior positions. A lot of them, unfortunately, are still in a state of denial. We find reactive knee-jerk reactions, wrong decisions being made. There's a lack of visibility, and a lot of leaders, instead of confronting the emotional turmoil that they have to manage, they withdraw into their own cocoon. There's insensitivity towards the emotional state of their people. I believe a lot of leaders have lost a dream. A lot of employees don't see a future. So we have insecurity, and the other problem that we've got is a denial of the impact of emotions on performance. I ever believe, Ray, the team, and those of you that are present on this webinar, that this has at last created a platform where leaders need to become aware of the impact of emotions on the performance of their people. Because what we find in business now is indecisiveness. Leaders don't trust their people because they don't trust themselves. There's a lack of engagement, and engagement starts with the heart. It starts with values. It really starts with, what are your belief systems? Are you prejudiced? These are all emotional aspects, and these have been underdeveloped over the past number of years. There's been a lot of writing, and I think people need to, in fact, spend time on that. That has an impact on teamwork. That has an impact on communication. So if I'm isolated, if I'm self-sufficient, if I start moving into a state of depression, I start losing focus myself. So that is what we have found. So I'm really
Ben, it's so interesting. It's so interesting what you're sharing with us, because just yesterday we were talking to our leaders here at the mine around how when people find themselves in a crisis situation, quite often the decisions that they make are not the decisions, the good decisions that they would make under normal conditions. And that emotional bias under stress really has an impact on your decision making. I mean, have you seen those sort of things happening now through COVID?
Ray, if I can share this with you, and I must say to you, I've never ever dealt with such a lot of conflict in organizations between members of teams and between senior leaders of organizations. I've never ever dealt with such a lot of bad decisions being made and top leaders not thinking through the consequences of their actions, because stress results in knee-jerk reactions. And I mean, that's really what we find.
Absolutely.
So the mind-shifting interventions that I really see that one should implement in the organization, and we've done this over a period of time prior COVID. It's actually very sad. That was prior COVID. We are doing some of this post-COVID, but individuals need to become aware of their own emotions. They need to become aware of their own mindsets. They need to become aware of the sensory impact of their smell, their touch, their sight, what they hear on their pulse rate. I think that's very, very important. And I think individuals in the workplace must be given self-regulatory tools by which they can monitor the emotional state and by which they can monitor, am I in a state of stress? Am I in a state of stress? Or am I in a state of alertness? Am I really calm? Am I alert? And managing that during the day. On the leader side, emotional diagnostic skills have become a must, because leaders need to really start understanding the impact of emotions on their people. So I think that is the key that we've got to work on. Leaders need to become, my 3 words that I want to use to summarize what I'm sharing with yourselves. Let's enhance our ability to become emotionally and mental well as leaders and employees. I think that's the first requirement. The second one is, let's enhance our emotional connectivity abilities. Because if we don't do that, in other words, our ability to connect with others, our ability to create opportunities for togetherness, innovative thinking in teams, dealing with challenges in teams. Now than ever before, because of isolation, people are shouting for contact and connectivity. So that's the second broad area. And if we connect, and if we emotionally and mentally well, then we can deliver, then we can focus, then we can flourish, then we can implement plans, then we can give people autonomy and responsibility. Because as long as we are in a state of survival, emotional state of survival, we will not be able to apply the principles of leadership.
Thank you, Ben. There's so much in there to think about. I know that there's some comments and questions in the chat box, which sadly I don't see, but Columba, are there 1 or 2 questions out there that we might want to put to Ben?
Well, more comments. There are several around renewing business approach, keeping everybody safe, maintaining a culture of some sort of semblance. But there's one here that goes hand in hand with what Ben was speaking about, keeping employees energized and engaged amidst their personal uncertainty while seeking some semblance of security from their leadership. I think that goes hand in hand with what Ben was just talking about from the emotional impact, and soon to be what John is going to talk about. And I don't want to take away your thunder by introducing John, Ray, but there is another, keeping the corporate stagnance, ostrich syndrome, and poor work culture and work ethic. That's a perfect segue for John.
Awesome. Well, let's do that. So John is going to talk to us around how the disruption is impacting the levels of trust, how that impact could result in disengagement. How do we work on the engagement of people within the workplace? Thank you very much, Ben, and John, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray and Ben. Yeah, very good lead in. And you both so well articulated the enormity of the change that businesses around the world have gone through since the advent of COVID. And the one thing we know for sure is that this change is brought around fundamental change about how we work, how we do work, how we work together as teams, and it's not likely to change. In fact, we call it the new normal because it is about the new normal. And it's going to continue to evolve over the coming months to years. But studies over the last 10 years by Gallup and every other organization in the world have consistently confirmed the compelling benefits of employee engagement in building a high-performance organizations and developing a culture that will engage long-term loyal customers. In fact, the only thing in this world of change that's not changing is that our employees and the attitudes of our employees are the only things that really differentiate us from our competitors. Again, that has not changed. That was before COVID, and it's going to continue on to the future. My own experience going back over into the mid-'80s and building high-performance organizations clearly supports these studies and proving the unlimited potential of our people when we as leaders create the right motivational environment for our employees to learn, grow, and flourish. It all starts with us. Are we ready? One other thing that hasn't changed through all this time of change is human nature, human behavior. So what are the fundamentals of employee engagement? If employee engagement is the key to us differentiating ourselves as an organization, if employee engagement is the key to unlocking the unlimited potential of our people, what is employee engagement? There are many, many different versions about what employee engagement is about. But there's 5 key needs that need to be addressed in an engaged organization. The first is, and ideally, the new environment we're working in today has provided a lot more autonomy to people because we're all working in a different environment. We're having to work on our own. We're making more decisions about when we actually work. As we integrate into working from home, working remotely, we've got a lot more autonomy to make decisions. But we really have to ask is, do we have the trust and confidence to work with our teams and to have our employees feel comfortable in their environment, to know that we have the trust and confidence in what they're doing and what we're doing, and that we have the right metrics in place so that we're all going to succeed. The second is mastery. Are we created a learning environment? Are we as leaders encouraging, enabling, and supporting the personal growth of our teams? Are we allocating the time in our calendars for coaching, mentoring, and feedback? Next is purpose. Does what we do together make a difference? And in today's world, that makes all the difference in the world. So do our employees each understand how their contribution is making a difference and how we as a larger whole are making a difference? Next is appreciation. Do we make the time to let our people know that we care? Do we take the time to say thank you, to reach out to our people and let them know that we appreciate the work that they're doing and the contribution that they're making to our team? And the last of the 5 fundamentals of engagement is connection. Are we a team? Do we encourage, support, and celebrate our success as a team? Do we create opportunities for human interaction and team building? You know, Ben, I highlighted so many different areas of stress and the emotional impact that the environment we're in. Are we recognizing that for our team? Are we recognizing that relative to the individuals that are on part of our teams? And are we taking action to ensure that we are, number one, aware, that we are supportive, and that we're creating that environment that keeps us integrated as a team and ensures that each of our individual employees are being recognized? So as the new normal of how we work and how we structure ourselves to do work evolves, what has been changing and what continues to change is the actions and behaviors required of leaders in the organization to build culture, to connect teams, and to engage with employees that will not likely be working from the same building or the same work environment. So how do we understand the personal needs, the health and wellness needs, the actual, how our people are doing today? How that we're being met and maintained. So how do we clearly communicate expectations, recognize contribution, and stay connected as a team all while recognizing the individual needs. So each individual has very, very specific needs. And again, Ben has very well articulated that. And how do we as leaders make sure that we understand those and we stay connected and we get the right amount of feedback and provide the right amount of feedback to make sure that we're all moving forward confidently and comfortably together? And how do we walk the talk on our values, build that trust and confidence with all team members in this changing and evolving work environment? And how do we, as leaders, plan and allocate our time to ensure that the needs of our employees are understood and supported? There's one fundamental of leadership. You can't lead others unless you can first understand and lead yourself. And change begins with us. We're the ones that have to start by taking that look in the mirror and understand, are we fully aware and engaged and connected? Are we aware of our own behaviors? Are we aware of our own inactions? Are we aware of the impact that our environment is having on us? And are we dealing with that such that we're in a position to reach out to our employees? And then finally, the workplace is changing. Are we ready?
John, thank you. There's a couple of things that stuck with me as you went through, and I'm going to ask Columba for some comments or questions from the audience in a moment. But that attitude of gratitude, recognizing, exactly, creating that in times of crisis, it's even more important than in normal times to create that attitude of gratitude and make it personal, make it specific, make it meaningful for the people of the organization. That is so important, that feedback loop and thanking people. So thank you for that, John. That's really, really helpful. Columba, are there some comments or questions out there that we maybe can address? We've got a couple of minutes.
I like this last comment here, connection, appreciation in the COVID times. That isn't now a big challenge. Culture was after a successful session. We could have I hope I'm saying this right, a braai barbecue, drinks, anything together with reduced human interaction, and it has become difficult to interact and connect with employees. And we find that through what's happening now. So that goes hand in hand with the other comments, Ray, in reference to poor work ethic, sustainability, compassionate employer. How do we keep people engaged and maintain? This one here, I think, is resonating, with all of us, is a renewed business approach to things. So those are some of the main comments that are being said at the moment.
Absolutely. You want to comment on something, John?
Yeah, we really, as leaders, we all really have to step back because, we're all conditioned human beings. We all follow the same patterns. We all respond the same way. That's just human nature. That's who we are as human beings. But in this new environment, we're the ones that have to first step back, understand what is our real work to be done. How do we first enable our team? What are all the actions that we take to walk this talk on our values and create that motivational environment and be supportive of our employees first? Absolutely. Before we get into the day-to-day of busy work that is part of our job too, but should be secondary to making sure that we're looking after our people first.
Absolutely. And I want to ask Ben, how does this connect with some of the work that you're doing? This attitude of gratitude and creating that workplace, that environments in the workplace, that work experience. How does that connect with some of the work that you're doing, Ben?
What I found, Ray, and I've got examples of that, as soon as leaders become aware of the impact of their beliefs and emotions on how they behave, and they accept that, then it's much easier for them to connect with the people around them. They become less selfish, they become less egocentric, because you can't reach out to other people if you are actually a prisoner of your own insecurities. A lot of leaders don't want to admit that. And I have found when leaders become aware of the emotional barriers that restricts them in trusting people, in creating a vision for the future, in connecting with others, I've seen changes in performance. I've seen changes and shifts in culture. But that's the starting point, and John mentioned that. That's Absolutely. Becoming aware of who I am, treating each of my direct reports as individuals. And I've always believed in an individual approach. when it comes to leadership. Also to employees. Leading others, you've got to understand the employees. And I've seen definite, tangible business results with increases in profitability, where some CEOs were not aware of those personal factors impacting on their behavior. I've seen it at lower levels, reductions in wastage on the production line. So I can give you numerous examples. But at the end of the day, emotions, at the end of the day, translates into behavior and values. And it starts with me.
Of course it does. Thank you, Ben. I'm gonna move on to Columba. Columba Vani is going to talk to us a little bit, and Columba, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about the effects of this disruption on the people of the organization, and it's alluded to in some of the comments is how do we create a better work experience? Because that work experience is becoming more and more important, and I think people are looking for that experience in the workplace. How do we create an experience for people, and in doing so, create an environment where you get discretionary effort, where people go the extra mile for the organization?
Well, I think in simple terms, it starts with a conversation, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about employee trends. We don't often do a lot of conversations anymore. Social media has taken over the world. And now with this new COVID situation, it seems that we are addressing ourselves to a computer screen more and more. John mentioned, you mentioned the disruption, Ray. John mentioned employee engagement. Ben mentioned the emotional impact and how do we understand the employees. There's been some comments from our audience in reference to maintaining the business, the culture. How do we eliminate the ostrich syndrome? Well, it really is putting the human experience at the center of businesses. Number one theme for 2020 and beyond is empathy. The emergency of employee experience, the AI syndrome that's going to be upon us very, very soon, if not already. Looking at our internal candidates, looking at our own people from the lens of keeping them retained, keeping them engaged. But also with all the shift that's going around in the world right now, we have to look at the multi-generational workforce. We're not all going away anytime soon. So the 2020s and beyond will be about putting people first. And that means that we have to take a look at how we keep our employees engaged. And in the next slide, as we look at the competition, right, in the world today, about the power is now being shifted from the institution to the individual. Businesses are looking at everything that they can do in the lens of the employee through the employee experience. They call that EX. EX is everything about how an employee observes, how they feel, how they interact with the company. And if we fall short of looking at what those experiences are for the employees, then we are going to have a cultural shift. We are going to have a difference of opinions. We are not going to keep our employees engaged. We want to make sure that they're committed and that they're productive and that the businesses are looking at everything they can do to keep the employee experience engaged. So the employee experience is about doing things with and for your employees, not to them. So how do we do that? We take a look at the 4 Ps of employee experience. We have to make this manageable. I mean, we can't, it's taking one bite of the elephant at a time. You can't just attack this all at the same time because it's overwhelming and it's not cost effective to the employer as well. So we have to take a look at the people. What are the relationships between the teams and the managers and the leadership? Are they conversing? Are they talking? Are they going through the employment journey together? Are they keeping things stimulated? Are they having productive conversations? Are you looking at the internal individual? Are we looking at the health factor of the employee? Do we keep them engaged? Don't forget, engagement is part of the journey. The experience is the end result. How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them from leaving the organization? Retention is going to be very key as we move through this journey in this next slide. So the companies are not doing this from an altruistic kind of point of view. They want to make sure that their employees have a good work experience, but they also want to make sure that they are getting the benefits as well. So as you can see in the next slide, retention is very key. 77% of employers, I should say, who engage in employee experience retain their employees. And they have to meet the generation of the employee productivity. What's in it for the bottom line? How do we keep things more productive? Just think about this. 2/3 of companies report employee experience has improved over the past 5 years, yet only half say that their experience is positive. That tells you that there is only half of your employees feeling and getting an excellent experience. If they're not on their way out, they're likely performing well below their capabilities. And why? Why does the employee experience suffer? Well, the companies are not listening to their workers. They're not listening to their employees. They have that ostrich syndrome. They're not keeping up with the culture. They're not keeping up with the engagement. Very much what John was saying. Are we listening with empathy? Do we know what's required? As Ben was saying, the emotional impact that we have on our employees. I've been on both ends, and I think we all have. And 99% of my job every day is having a conversation with someone, listening, empathy, and mentoring and coaching. And that's just not leadership, that's employees as well. It's a two-way street. We can't always give if we don't get something in return. So let's take a look at the snapshot of the generation. If you can see here, this tells you quite a great deal, that 73% of our current workforce range from 23 to 54. 23 to 54 years of age. So the experience of these generations has to have an impact on how the businesses relate to the employee experience. It's not a cookie cutter, not one fits all. So how do we do that? How do we get the best of these generations? Because as the boomers go off into the sunset and retire, hopefully one day, how do we get the next generation to take over and have that emotional impact? How do we get our leaders to work with those different generations? Because I would say most of our leaders in the business world are within the Generation X. Now, how do we get Generation X to work with millennials and Generation Z? We have to take a look at the different needs that are every single generation is needing. So most professionals acknowledge that the company needs to improve their internal recruiting. As you can see in this next slide, the biggest thing standing in the way is the managers. The managers like to keep their go-to people close. We've all been there. I've done it. I'm sure everyone else has done it, but we can't do that. We have to make sure that we get the best of our employees. So the problem is that the top performers can't leave their team to greener pastures internally. They're more likely to leave the company. So we have to take a look at why employees leave their jobs. And we have to incite the cultural differences between our own way of thinking, our emotional impact, how we drive the business, to the different ways that others need to be driven in the business. And if we don't do that, then there's going to be a multi-generational shift in the world. We have to make sure we stem the attrition. We have to maintain the retention. If we want the next generation to run the businesses, to be part of this world, to be productive, to be impactful, then we have to learn how to deal with the employees and their skills and linking them with opportunities. So remember, don't put everyone in a box. Realize that everyone wants to want the work that matter, and promote informal interactions across generations. And I came across this and I thought it tied it all together. Focus on the futures, work together to ensure people thrive now and in the future. Siri, well, I have a brighter future than my parents. And I put Siri in there because every time I said Alexa, my phone went off. So I had to change it to Siri. So focusing on the future calls on us to think anew about our responsibilities to our people, our shareholders, and our communities. It means prioritizing tomorrow by delivering on environmental and social commitments and examining how we can better support how people work at different life stages. It requires caring about employee well-being from the day they start to the day they retire. Delivering on these expectations ensures brighter futures for all. I want to thank you all. I really appreciate
Awesome.
the time and the opportunity.
Awesome, Columba. Thank you. There's so much in there that you've unpacked for us, and certainly I've got a lot of takeaways that I've noted. And one in particular thing you talked about was engagements. And one of my partners that works with me in leadership development, he likes to define culture by the quality of engagements. And I think you can have 1,000 different definitions of culture, right? But that one really does make it measurable for leaders. So my question to the leaders out there in our audience, what's the quality of your engagements like? Maybe it's something we all need to focus on and say, how many quality engagements did I have today with my people? And how can I do better? How can I improve that engagement?
It all starts with a conversation, right? It all starts
Absolutely, conversations and engagement. Are there any questions that, I know you've been talking, Columba, and are there any comments that we got a little bit of time to address?
Yeah, there's one here. How do we address the what's in it for me culture attitude that seems to be gaining traction as we become more socially distanced?
Okay.
I would suggest that the what's in it for me is not new and emerging. It's all part of human nature. You know, people respond and they connect with things that they have an emotional connect with, and they align with things that align with their values and what's important to them. And our job as leaders is to understand that. And I don't think it's anything new. I think we just better recognize the opportunity that if we can make that emotional connection and have our people make the emotional connection, number one, they're more likely to stay. Number two, they're going to be significantly more productive. And number three, they're going to take more ownership for our business. But our job is to help to make that connection between business values and individual values. So the what's in it for me has always been there. We're just learning that there's significantly more value that we can generate for all of our team if we recognize it.
Absolutely.
And Ray, there's a great comment here from Nathan Miller. I heard a great spin from Pamela Hackett from Proudfoot that related with common themes of traditional lean and emotional management of employees. 1-5-30. It involves checking in with employees once a day. 1 for daily checkup, quick chat, once a week. 5 for overall the achievement of weekly goals, work engagement, whatever has been set out for themselves to achieve. And once a month, 30 for greater overview of staying on track with the goals, personal business. As Pam stated, this could alleviate the need for an annual review. Agree. Maintain a steady engagement between the manager and peer and helps keep the finger on the pulse with the employees. The investment of time and efforts supports trust and collaboration. I could not agree with that more.
Absolutely. What a breath of fresh air that is. I mean, how many leaders, we're so busy measuring the bottom line performance. How often do we measure our engagement with our people? Quality engagements.
Very good.
That's what we need. And the comment that was made around what's in it for me is really interesting, because it's as you've put it, John, it's always been there. But I think it's a great interlude for us to move on to Tracy, because I'm going to ask Tracy to talk about how do we turn that around? How do we turn? I'm not saying we mustn't address what's in it for me. It's really, really important. It's key, as we've been talking about. But how do we turn what's in it for me to what's in me for it? How do we unleash that passion of discretionary effort, turning the secret story of the company's purpose into the common purpose of the people? Tracy.
Thank you, Ray. Yes, very much what's in me for it. And the it there is very much, we're talking about strategy and culture as well. But I think, strategy and purpose, as John spoke about, it's such a powerful lever in terms of, harnessing engagement, motivation, inspiration. And yet, if you ask the sort of average employee in most companies, you know, about the strategy, any questions about the strategy, what's your strategy, you're most likely to be met with a blank stare. I mean, you would almost think its strategy is our best kept secret rather than a very powerful tool to unleash discretionary effort. And I think one of the reasons for this, and one of the issues, is that in all our good intentions to get the strategy out there, we are very, what I call SOS-ish, send out stuff. We send that message. So there's a lot of stuff that we send out. And just to give you an example of what I mean by SOS, I remember getting a call, I think it was sort of mid 2014, so quite a number of years ago, from the CEO, his name is Peter, of a multinational conglomerate. And, you know, from the tone of this call, I could just hear this guy was so frustrated. He was tearing his hair out. This company had just been through a big restructuring, and they had been in the process of rolling out their strategy for the previous 18 months. So they had done it all. They had done the Rolls Royce, they had done road shows, they had done brochures, they had done workshops, they had done really a lot of stuff. And he, as he related to me, he said, you know, and I called my senior managers together yesterday to get some feedback and to discuss. And he said, you know, when the topic came up, it was just like a whole lot of blank stares and some sort of sheepish leafing under the desk through a document. And I think, you know, it really is what this pandemic and this whole situation provides us with is the opportunity to see what is it that we actually need to change in terms of how we go about this. We are not using this lever, I think, at all in terms of how powerfully we can use it, in terms of connecting to purpose, in terms of using you know, emotions, attracting people, unleashing discretionary effort. So if we go to the next slide, you know, what is it that where do we go wrong? And this is well-documented research that probably most of you have seen, but I think it goes to how do we remember stuff? And obviously, if you look at the right-hand side of the slide, you know, when you're communicating strategy, when you're communicating culture, you want people to remember, obviously, at a 90% retention rate. What you'll see there, though, is we tend to, the stuff that we send out is mainly stuff that people can read or hear. We don't get a lot to it's actually about the employees talking about a visual, talking about something that they see. And I think this provides us with the opportunity to do things differently that really, really work. So if we go to the next slide, Ray, what does work? And what I've done here is really just distill principles that we have used and seen to work over the last 12 years, helping companies get their strategy understood. The first one is to use the memorability of a story. Stories are incredibly powerful tools to get your message to stick. So there's research that says stories are 7 times more memorable. Stories make the abstract concrete. So we talk about very abstract things in business. We talk about strategy, values, purpose. And when you use a story, it actually brings everything down to earth. When you combine that with an analogy or you use an analogy, it really is like a bit of a shortcut. It's almost like an algorithm that takes a lot of information and makes it very, very easy and simple to understand. So if you talk about, you know, what's the Everest we need to climb? What's the marathon we need to finish? People really hook onto that, relate to it. And an added benefit of story, just to tie into what the previous speakers have said, is it taps into the emotions. It's exciting, it unleashes passion, it inspires people. The next principle that really works is a visual, to visualize the story, to actually see something. And that's the work that we focus a lot on. When everybody's looking at the same picture, things come together, they find themselves in that picture. But by far, I think the most powerful part of it is when you have a picture that is an analogy or a story, and you use it as a leadership tool. You equip your leaders to actually talk with their people about the strategy, about the culture, about what it means for me, about what I have in me to contribute to it. That's the conversation. That's what we've been talking about. Columba was talking about the conversations that we need to have. And what this does, it's a little bit of a catalyst to say, you know, we need to actually do things a little bit differently here. Let's talk around this picture. And the leader actually, rather than being the talking head, which is the normal way of doing things, needs to be the facilitator, the questioner, the getting, the eliciting the responses from his or her team. That's where the internalization happens. Ray, next slide, please. So you might be thinking, well, you know, how does this work in practice? Or how do we put this into practice? So I thought I would just show a very, very quick example of some work that we did. We created a visual story map for a client a few years ago. And this map is really about their journey. What they had as their strategic objective was they wanted to internationalize the business. They had a footprint, a geographic footprint in Australia, South Africa, and North America. And they wanted to go, as it says in the sort of scroll text on the top left-hand side, where no South African company had gone before. They wanted to build a global enterprise. So we depicted this as the journey towards the global enterprise. And you see there is the global enterprise. We had the opportunity to talk about everything that we wanted to get across about that business, from culture to the engines that drive the business, to the galaxy it was heading towards. What I wanted to make the point of is, you know, every visual story map, every analogy you use is different. So it has to suit the business. It could be a soccer game, it could be a mountain climb, whatever. But the underpin is always the same. So there's a very important content architecture that needs to underpin the story. And you'll see these points. This is very much the sort of pillars of strategy, the journey so far. Where have we come from? Strategic objectives, where are we heading to? What are the stakeholders saying? What are the drivers, the initiatives that we're undertaking? What is the from culture, where the culture we want to move from and the culture we want to move to? So that gives you a sense of, you know, the content architecture is always similar. The analogy needs to be matched to the specifics of the business.
Tracy, it's so interesting how on that map, and I've worked with you on some of this work you've done, and it's incredible how this map and the story captures the essence of business. Have you seen real examples where you've seen results come from these stories, and how the conversations have changed in organizations?
You know, absolutely, Ray. I can't emphasize this enough. You know, sometimes people look at this and they think, oh, that's a cute little picture, but actually it's an incredibly powerful tool. Just last week, I got a text from a client that we did work with about 2 years ago. It was strategy and culture work. And he said to me, you know, I cannot tell you how having the strategy laid out and the culture, one culture that we have, has actually helped us during this pandemic. He said, you know, I don't want to be over dramatic, but it hasn't just saved livelihoods, it's actually saved lives. So it's really incredible. It's an incredible tool, a catalyst to change the way that we do things, to do strategy with employees, and to get them to see themselves in this journey, to get that purpose to be something real and exciting. Absolutely. To get out of bed for. Thanks. So I think, yeah, this is the part that I was just talking about. The picture is great and we love doing the picture, but it's really the conversation that the picture catalyzes that changes everything. And it's really what it does is it equips what we work to do, and we work with leaders to equip them to be able to have those conversations. So what happens then is strategy is not just like this one-off thing that we put and we note and we say, okay, that's it. It's actually an ongoing conversation about the business. So that's really, that is when you see people really relate, when you see them related to their own team, that's when it really starts to take off. So just to sort of summarize the principles, it's really about people seeing something, very importantly about people actually talking about what they see, And that's where the retention actually sits, where the application on a
Absolutely.
daily basis sits. And we see strategy and culture are actually not that difficult. And leaders have a critical key role to play in actually making all of that happen. So it's really an exciting journey to see this take shape in an organization.
Absolutely, Tracy. It just seems to bring culture and strategy together. It's just so clear to me how that conversation that we talked about, the quality of those engagements can just be enhanced to capture the hearts of your people, to drive the culture in the direction you want it to go, and to deliver on the strategy. It just makes so much sense to me. And I think what I've heard is strategy actually is not changing. How we deliver strategy is not changing. But what's becoming more and more and more important is people. And I think that's what the pandemic has brought out. And a lot of the comments I heard Columba talk about was all about, how do I keep my people engaged? How do I motivate people? It's all about people. Because at the bottom, at the end of it, business is actually about people. It's about people. And I think now more than ever before, people want to work for companies where the missions and business philosophies resonate with them, not just intellectually, but also emotionally. What's in it for me? And if you can address the what's in it for me, you've got an actively engaged leadership team, you've got an actively engaged and inspired workforce, and you get the what's in it for me proverbially off the table because that's addressed, then we turn to what's in me for it. And I think that's the challenge to leaders out there. We've got a few minutes for questions. Are there any questions for Tracy? Are there some comments that you've seen, Columba, that we can address?
I haven't seen any yet, but just to resonate with what everybody says, if we just remember that success starts with people. And if we continue to have the conversations, start the conversations, it goes hand in hand with the ostrich syndrome. And I think that was a great analogy that Stephen Golding had. It does create poor culture and it does stagnate the organization. So I know it's hard for some people to have conversations. I know that some people are not people-centric. I totally get that. But there's ways around that. There's ways of helping individuals to start those conversations because success does start with people. And I have Brian Anderson, clearly a great group of, thank you, Brian. Brian wants to thank the whole panel. And he says we're a great group of professionals. And thank you, Brian. That was very sweet. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Brian. So I don't know if there's any other questions. We've got a couple of minutes, but maybe there are questions. So think about them, post them to Columba, and we can address them or to the chat box. Yep.
Just a comment that I think is, for me, what really strikes me is it is terrible what we're going through. It's a global pandemic, but despite that, I think there's really an opportunity for us as leaders it's kind of an unfreeze moment, if I can use that. Everything's up for grabs. And I think, to change the way that you've always done it, to do things a little bit differently in accordance with these principles, to focus more on people, to thank people, to appreciate people. I just think it's such an opportunity for us, because often what keeps us doing it the way we've always done it is because that's how we've always done it. So I think this is an opportunity for us to break out and do things differently, and we'll see the results.
Absolutely, Tracy. Thank you. I don't know if Ben or John have got any closing remarks before we wrap up.
Oh, I think just to summarize. Go ahead, Ben.
What resonated with me when Tracy spoke about the visual elements of the strategy. I mean, I thought about myself, and I think all of us must think, what picture do people see of us as leaders? What is their picture that they see of us? They must see the strategy in a picture, but what is their visual impression that they have of us?
Absolutely.
They make certain deductions from that.
Ben, so we've done, occasionally we do some work that gets a little bit close to that. And yeah, it's, sometimes it really hits home. when you see through the eyes of employees how they're seeing leadership. It's not pretty always. So yeah,
it's not always what you want to hear. Sometimes the brutal reality can wake you up, right, Tracy?
Absolutely. But it's courageous of a leader to say, guys, this is where we are, because we actually have to all be on one page to go forward to the future. So
thanks, Tracy. John, you were going to make a remark?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to affirm what each of us have been saying, that, we can make business seem as complicated as we want to, but ultimately business is all about people dealing with people dealing internally with each other, and our people dealing with our customers. And if we understand that and we get to the essence of human motivation, human behavior, and human engagement, we can't help but be successful. But if we allow ourselves to get distracted in all the other things that are related to business and not put that first, it just gets difficult.
Thank you, John. Thank you to all the panelists. There are a few follow-ups that we're going to have. So all those who've attended, we will be sending out a PDF of this presentation that we've talked through. So look forward to that, receiving that email. Together with that, you're going to get a link to listen to Tracy's book on audio. So there will be a link for that for you to listen to, and I encourage you to do that. I've read her book. It's awesome. It's practical. It's something you could use in your daily leadership journey. And we'll also send you some information on goal setting, because one of the things from this, I hope, is that you've got one or two ideas how to deal with some of those challenges you wrote down at the start of the webinar. So we will send you some thoughts on goal setting, because leaders set goals. And leaders accomplish goals, and they accomplish that through setting them and setting out actions to achieve them. So we will be sending that out to each of you within the next sort of 24 hours. So thank you all for joining us. I've certainly had fun, and thank you to the panelists for sharing your thoughts and your experience and your knowledge with us.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone.
Everybody
Yes,
have a great
thank you.
day. Stay safe.
Thanks for joining us.